staging of the public sector debate competition. We're delighted to have your company this morning for a milestone staging of the competition, and we welcome those of you who have joined us online as well. I am Paula Shea Hastings, a communication specialist at the TIU and your host for this morning. Over the years, the competition has been a catalyst for bold ideas, strengthened connections among colleagues, and of course, brought a very vibrant energy to the public service. The past 4 editions have delivered truly engaging debates and insightful perspectives, and each year we've seen an increased standard. This morning, we are on the 3rd and final day of preliminary round 1, where we've already seen a record-breaking 32 teams vying for the title of Public Sector Debating Champions. Last year's champion, of course, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining, have returned to defend their title. Now, will they hold on to that crown, or will a new team, maybe one of our teams here today, seize the trophy and claim the coveted bragging rights? So this is the final day of round 1, and the second preliminary round will commence on May 12 to truly decide which teams advance to the next round. Now, on to the matter at hand this morning. Let's get to meet our 2 teams that will be putting their best arguments forward. And just so you know, the teams that we're seeing today, we have in proposition the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and in opposition the Teaching Service, and they are debating the moot. Be it resolved that the benefits of a centralized national digital identity system outweigh the risks to privacy and civil liberties. So let's get to meet the teams, starting with Team Proposition. You may go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, good morning. My name is Aquino Robinson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donald French, Jr.
Great morning, everyone. My name is Kamisha Anderson.
Proposition, and now Team Opposition, if you will do us the honors.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kevin Grant.
Morning, everyone. I'm Rasheen Nelson.
Morning, everyone. My name is Tevin Cameron.
Thank you, team. Of course, we have our adjudicators for today's match, our partners from the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment Limited, JADE. Judges, please introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Paula Shea. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jermaine Barrett. I'll be the chair adjudicator for this match.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roshana Jarrett, and I'll serve as one of your wing adjudicators for this morning's match.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dacardiga Nelson, also serving as a wing. All the best to both teams.
Thank you, judges. The teams are familiar with the rules, so let the debate begin. Over to you, judges, and good luck, teams.
Thanks again, Paula Shea. So teams, you have come here to perform excellently. You already know the rules, but our viewing audience might not be so familiar, so I'll go through those rules with them, or for them. So both teams have 3 debaters. The first debater will speak for 7 minutes, the second for 6, the third for 5. After the first 2 debate speeches have been delivered, that's after the first opposition speaker rather, we'll have a period of cross-examination. We'll have another period of cross-examination after the second pair of speeches. That's after the second opposition speaker's presentation. After the second segment of cross-examination, we'll pause the debate for 1 minute. Thereafter, we'll have the reply speakers deliver their presentations, beginning with that from the opposition side, and then we'll conclude with the presentation from the reply speaker of the proposition team. Debaters, please take cognizance of the time signals. The first and last minutes are protected. In between those two signals, the first, you'll after the first minute, but before the last minute, points of information are allowed specifically for the first two speakers on each team. The final speaker, the reply speaker, no points of information are allowed during their presentations. Okay? Teams, do you have any questions? Not until the match. Well, let's get that started then. This time, let us make welcome the first speaker from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. Let us make the first proposition speaker welcome.
Adjudicators, my worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My colleagues and I are here to affirm the motion of today's debate. Be it resolved that the benefits of a centralized ID system outweigh the risks to privacy and civil liberty. We will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that having a centralized ID system will not just prove beneficial to government's social protection infrastructure and processes, but will also move to strengthen current privacy and data protection laws through its implementation. To better our understanding, a national digital identification framework in which a citizen's identity can be verified through a secure source defines a centralized ID system. The protection of one's personal data from unauthorized access and freedom from unwarranted government interference and/or discrimination is the basis of privacy and civil liberty. Benefits equate to positive outcomes or gains to be received, while risks are substantiated with the possibility of harm, loss, or negative outcomes. And finally, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, outweigh means be greater or more important than something else. For years, we have called for improved government services, but civil and social protection infrastructure and processes have seemed to remain the same, if not regressed. Imagine living in a society where you need several forms of ID to conduct simple day-to-day transactions. Imagine having to visit a justice of the peace to get a letter to prove you are who you say you are. You can further imagine having experienced a record-breaking Category 5 hurricane and being unable to access immediate relief in order to eliminate your prolonged suffering because the government is unable to conduct rapid citizen verification. Well, imagine no more, adjudicators. Imagine no more, my opponents. Imagine no more, ladies and gentlemen, for that is our reality. This is why we strongly believe that the implementation of a centralized ID system, given its benefits, will outweigh the associated risk to privacy and civil liberties. We are not saying that risk will be eliminated. However, the benefits overwhelmingly outweigh the risks. We stand on that, for we are the people's ministry.
In the examples that you presented, the reality is that there are multiple ways in which an individual can prove their identity, but in the resolution that you are defending with a national centralized ID system, there is presumably no alternative.
All right, so my opponent, we're not here to debate whether or not there are alternatives. What we're debating is whether or not there's a risk to the system that we're proposing. Walk with me in the shoe of a mother of 4 living in White House, Westmoreland, who lost her husband after their house collapsed during the passage of Hurricane Melissa, leaving her with no stream of income. The family is now displaced, vulnerable, and traumatized. The mother, a proud woman, brought up on self-sustaining principles, must now seek state support to feed, educate, and care for her children. Under the current fragmented system, she must travel long distances to multiple government agencies to reacquire lost documentation, birth certificates, TRN, national insurance schemes card, complete lengthy forms, await lengthy verification across agencies. Fundamentally, A centralized ID system would heighten immediate verification. The family's eligibility for path could rapidly
Point of information. Then the simple fix to that is for the government agencies to interact with each other. You don't have to require the mother to have to move to different government agencies when
My opponent, I am now wondering if we're arguing the same moot, because the moot is not whether or not there are alternatives. The moot is whether or not that the risk outweighs the benefits of having the system. Now, Mr. Chairman, as the People's Ministry, we will outline the ways in which, as other countries have done before us, our proper implementation of a centralized ID system will contribute to the economy by improving service delivery times, providing efficiency across interconnected agencies, being convenient for citizens, and allowing for financial inclusion. Some examples of this is the Aadhaar in India, the Taudat Zehut in Israel, and the EID in Estonia. Surely, the National Identification System took notes from these books. As is always the case in Jamaica, we adopt something and do it better. In Israel, this type of ID is given when an individual turns 16, and we are of the opinion that a centralized ID system in Jamaica would be welcoming to students who will be working their first summer job. This would be useful not only as a form of ID, they can use it to prove their identity, but also to open their first bank account. A centralized ID system would require building trust into the system from the group up, with citizens' data being pooled into one centralized location. The question of security is most definitely going to pop up. This would entail ensuring the proper legal framework and data protection laws are in place. This centralized ID system would have to be built using privacy by design architecture. There should be a tiered access control so that not every agency can see everything about a particular data subject. The laws should clearly define what the system can be used for, as well as outline limitations to its use. Citizens, as per the DPA, will have various rights surrounding data, such as the right to know who accesses their data and when. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who wish to be cynical, they will cast shadows by preaching weak data protection frameworks and oversight gaps. They'll stand on their soapboxes and lament about government surveillance, data breaches, and rights to trade-offs. Attorneys at law, Myers, Fletcher, and Gordon, have trumpeted the strength of Jamaica's Data Protection Act.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, sir, you're out of time. We give thanks for the presentation just tendered in this debate from the first proposition speaker. We now invite the leader of the opposition, or the first opposition speaker, to deliver their presentation. Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition side will gladly stand on the soapboxes if it means that we protect the civil liberties of our citizens. Firstly, with some rebuttals. The first proposition contended that we are not here to consider alternatives. Well, Mr. Speaker, I will ask the panel to remember that the very duty of the opposition bench is to provide alternatives to the situation that they are attempting to solve. And what we've been presenting in our points of information is that the status quo already contains sufficient means of resolving the problems they are identifying. For example, it is not true that in the state of emergency or whatever situation that they presented, that an individual who has an ID must also prove identity by the letter of a JP. No, if the person has an electoral ID, it's sufficient. If the person has a driver's license, it's sufficient. If the person has a passport, it's sufficient. And so we contend that there are in status quo already existing mechanisms to prove the identity of Jamaican citizens. And so we are left to wonder, what is it that is so unique about a centralized system that we need to do away with what exists in status quo, but not just do away with it, but blatantly disregard the privacy of its citizens and ignore the civil liberties of those citizens. That, Mr. Speaker, is what the proposition has failed to examine, that the motion requires them to debate. We are not here, based on the wording of the motion, to debate whether or not some identification system is important. The match is about them justifying ignoring the privacy of citizens and the civil liberties of those citizens in the name of providing such an identification system. I posit to you, panel, that they are already losing the match because they have not yet engaged with that nuance, critical nuance of the motion. So let us go ahead and engage with that critical nuance of the motion, Mr. Speaker. We suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that this motion is asking us to talk about, and ultimately we don't have too much of a problem with their major definitions, but if you take those definitions and frame the motion, opposition is of the view that whatever the government stands to gain from all ministries and their offices accessing all that can be known about any citizen is not worth eliminating the constitutional rights of those citizens. And so, what are the burdens in this match? The burdens in this match include the following. I'll take you in a bit. The burdens include that proposition must be willing to accept that if they are going to infringe upon the rights of the citizens, that they are willing to do that just so that they can achieve this identity system. Because the motion suggests that the benefits to be derived from this system is more important than the privacy and the civil rights of those citizens. We also suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that in order to win, the proposition must also prove that whatever we stand to gain from this cannot be achieved without the disruption to the privacy and civil liberties of the citizens. Now, in order for us to win, Mr. Speaker, we need to prove that the benefits of the system do not take precedence over the privacy and civil liberties of the citizens, and that the stated benefits can be achieved without sacrificing those privacy and civil liberties. I'll take the point now. All right, thank you. I am certain, Mr. Speaker, that I have gotten to the meat of the moot. The moot says that they must argue that when they have a choice between privacy and civil liberties, they are willing to sacrifice that to achieve the benefits from an identity system. They have not argued that, and the moot is very clear on that. No. A bit of signposting. I am going to argue that this resolution is essentially the setting of the precedence that basic humanity is slave to the whims of the government of the day. And that's a very bad precedence, Mr. Speaker. I will also argue, Mr. Speaker, that this is the biggest step to the destabilization of a functional democracy, and that the status quo is already sufficient to achieve their goals. Rushane is going to argue that the resolution, ironically, doesn't serve national interest because when you centralize that much data that hackers and other countries are interested in, it makes government a private target for hacking. So ironically, it's not helping national security either. And then Tevin is going to take all that we've done and answer some of the questions that we have about the resolution. Now let's move on very quickly, Mr. Speaker. My first argument, that the resolution is beyond the revocation of rights of people when people have committed crimes. That's what the precedents exist. It is their job to give precedence why we are allowed to get rid of constitutionally protected human dignity. What do I mean by that, Mr. Speaker? These civil liberties and rights from international conventions that we are signatories to and the Constitution were enshrined in these documents to prevent the same thing that we are debating right now, to prevent a government from overreaching its power and taking control unjustly of the life of human beings. So much so that they cease to be viewed as human beings. Now, what does that mean? It means then, Mr. Speaker, that there are certain things about humanities that make us human. The right to protect our property, the right to remain anonymous, the right to freedom of movement. You will notice that they argued that this ID system will make it easy for them to find and identify people, thus infringing on the right to freedom of movement. Now we posit, Mr. Speaker, that when people infringe on the rights of others, that the government does get to step in and take away that right to freedom of movement by locking them up in jail. But that occurs because the government is fulfilling its function as the umpire in society. Their resolution is that the government moves from being an umpire and being the individual who determines whether or not people get to access their fundamental rights as human beings. This is a dangerous precedent, Mr. Speaker, because that suggests that even a democracy cannot trust in Jamaica, where we have low trust, that this democracy... All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. Of course, you recognize you're out of time there. All right, so we're grateful for the opening presentations from both teams. We now move to the first segment of cross-examination. In this segment, the opposition team, the teachers, the teaching services team gets an opportunity to ask first the questions to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security's the proposition team. Each of those questions is limited to 10 seconds. Each response limited to 45 seconds. Teaching service, you may begin.
My opponents, you mentioned that civil and social protection is necessary and it's being undermined. Based on the status quo, what elements of this reality are you fixing with a centralized digital system?
Now, under the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, we were able to get benefits out to our citizens during the Hurricane Melissa assistance, because we had a centralized TRN system, which is the same as the national ID system. So we were not able, however, to verify addresses, and that caused a problem because there are some areas in Jamaica where there are no stable or placed addresses. But we have also not been able to verify persons who do not have any names in Jamaica because they don't have a unique identifier. So there are still gaps in the system, even though they are trying to use what is available.
You say there is no unique identifier, yet you just argued that the TRN is a unique identifier. Can you please share with us what is this new system going to provide that a TRN doesn't provide, that a passport doesn't provide, and that the national ID, electoral ID rather, doesn't provide?
Well, my opponent, right now the TRN isn't mandatory, so not everyone has it. So even though we have tried to use what is available to us, because it's not mandatory, there are some citizens who accept it are in the centralized system as we have it now, but they are not mandated to do so. But our proposal is that a centralized ID system would be required for everyone.
Could you concede that a centralized, efficient national ID is a solution to the problem rather than a database?
How would you have a centralized ID system without a database? It creates a database.
To clarify, and if
It creates a database automatically. So how would you have one without having a database?
All right. Continue. No, 10 seconds there.
General.
All right. So
Your answer.
So I just wanted to also point out that my opponents wanted to seem as though having a centralized ID system is a greater risk than not being able to monetize our citizens. So there are some citizens who don't exist at all in Jamaica. They're here, but they don't exist in a database.
Thank you. Thanks to both teams for this phase of cross-examination. We continue now, extending the invitation to the proposition team for them to ask questions of the opposition team. Go ahead, Ministry of, rather the People's Ministry.
Yes. So my opponents, you keep well, you're trying to give the impression that a centralized ID system is not needed because in some aspects it will criminalize or citizens. But that still has not answered the question on whether or not a centralized ID system is at a greater risk.
Ask a question within 10 seconds. That's all you're permitted to do now. Arthur will allow you now to ask that question within 10 seconds.
So do you believe that a centralized ID system where our citizens would have access to greater benefits is more risk than them not receiving benefits at all?
First of all, Mr. Speaker, they did not present or argue a case in which this ID system makes people have access to better benefits from the government. We think healthcare access is going to remain the same. All they are contending is that the centralized system will make it easier for them to identify and find people, which can be easily done in status quo. Now, I did argue, Mr. Speaker, that their resolution is essentially criminalizing people, and that is because the precedence is that when you remove civil liberties like the freedom of speech, freedom of privacy, and stuff like that, it is only because people are convicted criminals. But their system is capturing data from people and centralize it in a database even before they are considered suspects of a crime.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that our opponents are mistaken. As we have, at what point did we argue that we would have taken away freedom of speech, freedom of expression?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the motion says that it outweighs the privacy and civil liberties of people, which includes freedom of movement, freedom of, or the right to remain anonymous, and all of that is enshrined in the phrase privacy and civil liberties that they are dancing around. We contend, Mr. Speaker, that it is okay if an individual have forfeited these rights by committing a crime, that you can take away stuff like their freedom of anonymity by virtue of trying to find them to investigate the crime. But, Mr. Speaker, the centralized system that goes against anonymity and freedom of movement is essentially, by virtue of being born in Jamaica, you are already giving to the police and the government information that they ordinarily only take when you are under investigation.
All right, so my opponents, you've argued that we would be stripping citizens of their privacy and civil liberties. However, under the current Data Protection Act, there are exclusions for journalism and national security measures to be taken. What do you say then to the Data Protection Act?
It seems you're confused. The Data Protection Act is different from what we are arguing here. We are arguing that with this centralized system, you don't only get the benefits of identity, but there are other features that are embedded in the system, which requires citizens to give up their information to the government, which is held by the government. The Data Protection Act would not cover that area. It doesn't say that the government cannot use this information. It doesn't say that the government cannot require that this information be nationally required for a form of identification, and all persons need to subscribe, whether mandatory or by practice. So we are not talking about protection of data that is put out there by private individuals. We're talking about a national system that requires them to give this information.
Thank you, both teams, for this segment of cross-examination. We continue now with the presentation from the second proposition speaker. Hear, hear.
Esteemed adjudicators, my fellow colleagues, worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. let us not throw out the baby of the future with the bathwater of the past. We are not saying that there are no risks, but what we affirm is that the benefits greatly outweigh these risks. What do you think poses a greater risk? A fragmented system where there is documented exclusion and barriers to access to a centralized ID system, or a system that identifies with our most vulnerable? My Prime Minister would have so eloquently affirmed and delivered practical real-life scenarios as to why we are in desperate need of a centralized system. We acknowledge the concerns, but the benefits outweigh the risks to privacy and the civil liberties. My opponents would have mentioned that we are stripping the rights of these citizens, but currently, even under the Data Protection Act, as my Prime Minister would have mentioned, in building the centralized ID system, you will have a privacy by design architecture, which would include strengthening our current Data Protection Act, which does include exemptions for national security and journalism. So by that very nature, only then, if the clauses are met, would that exemptions and privacy be stripped away from the individual. I'll take it shortly. My opponents will aim to dissuade you and attempt to prove that they are right. But unfortunately, the NSWMA did not enter this competition, so the propaganda will not be sold. We've seen the benefits that it can do from a socio-economic and financial inclusion standpoint, and we've spoken in depth about mitigating the risks surrounding privacy. What I'll now seek to share is just how we can further make this system a reality. Your point.
Mr. Speaker, the proposition does not get to argue a hypothetical world in which they get to strengthen the very things that the motion says they must debate or subvert or subordinate to the goal of getting an ID system. They must argue.
So, we are saying that the centralized ID system will outweigh. If we are putting this system in place, the NITS bill is before Parliament. The reason why it is not fully adopted is because of the very lack in the strengthening of these policies. If we push to strengthen it, we can gain wider adoption. By having a centralized ID system, the tax dollars that we currently spend on multiple licenses across multiple platforms for various programs can be better distributed to enhance other areas of the economy. By having a central system, the cost for maintaining these additional platforms will be eliminated. Implementation would also be a breeze, as we can utilize existing databases, clean them up without the need of starting from scratch, reducing enrollment time and whatever associated fees for some citizens. Right now, as it stands, multiple data sharing agreements across different ministries are following Hurricane Melissa. Labor wants to give support under the ROOS program. Industry Investment and Commerce seeks to bring relief to business owners, and NHT wants to help support homeowners. The problem, however, is that all these entities have different platforms verifying and even duplicating the same person, and that's only half the problem, with the other being that the data is mismatched across all these platforms. If this were centralized, the money spent on licensing these several programs, as well as billable work hours our civil servants spend, having to sift through this data could be better allocated. That same money could be pushed into further social protection areas, road rehabilitation, education, or healthcare. Another benefit is that this centralized system is of greater efficiency across these interconnected agencies and would improve service delivery times. It would be the primary and single source of truth. Imagine how legally invisible a person would be if they didn't have a driver's license, a voter's ID. The centralized ID system can definitely help in this capacity. One could be issued a unique identifier that is tied into their demographic, their biometrics, their place of residence, their bank account, file taxes, apply for government. People would now be seen as having a digital footprint and be woven into the very fabric of our economy. You see, in today's Jamaica, we can walk into the court, pay $1,000, thousands of dollars in fines for traffic tickets, walk out, and in half an hour still be arrested for these very same tickets due to the lack of the interconnected systems.
Point, sir. Is the proposition saying that my right to not have a police officer know my whereabouts 24/7 to plant evidence and conduct nefarious activity is supposed to be subordinate to the government's interest of saving money?
Again, my Prime Minister spoke about privacy by design and a tiered access system. The information would not be shared unless there is sufficient exemption within the Act for it to be shared with the national security team. The CARE program under COVID-19 saw multiple people who were able to self-verify from the comfort of their own house and phones, received relief cash grants within the days of the government's announcement. You see, when systems are centralized, verification is faster, requires less paper submission, and offers reduced wait times. The benefit is twofold: less effort for citizens and a lower compliance burden for businesses and the government. If you are someone who cares about the efficiency and productivity within the public sector, then you would know the relief that such a centralized system would bring. It gives our civil servants more time to focus on other meaningful tasks that will push our country to where we actually need to be. To borrow words from the famous Chuck Yeager, you don't concentrate on risks, you concentrate on results, because no risk is too great to prevent the necessary job from getting done. If we always aim to adapt and implement appropriate safeguards and oversight mechanisms, risks can be managed and mitigated. The opposition should therefore not be focusing on risks, but work with the government to ensure that the proper protocols are in place to support the adoption and deliver the needed results.
Thank you very much. Second, the proposition speaker there from the Ministry of Labour, Social Security. We now call upon the second speaker from the teaching services team, the opposition team, to advance the opposition's case. Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker and members of this Honorable House, the problem we're having in our society is that this is not accepted some places while this is accepted. What we lack is a real national ID that solves these problems of identification. What the proposal from our opponents is that it's a system that goes too far. We give credit to the identification component and saying that is good and it offers benefits. But we say the centralized data collection is a primary tool for infringement on the rights of citizens in terms of their privacy and their civil liberties. If we should take note, as they say, of other countries, then we would have taken a step back and realized that we are running in the wrong direction, where countries such as Canada and New Zealand have chosen not to go forward with the centralized system, but to create a nationalized identification system to use for its citizens rather than infringing on their rights through a centralized system. We need to understand that the role of the government is to provide It's a role of the government to provide efficient public services, but it is the duty of the government to uphold the rights and the constitutional privileges of its citizens. The inefficiencies that we see in our system is not because we cannot identify persons. The inefficiencies are a lack of manpower, caused by a lack of manpower, largely a paper-based system, and no standardized national ID that is available to all citizens and is not bulky like a passport. So the centralized identity system creates irreversible risks to privacy and freedom and democracy, which outweigh the efficiencies that they gain. And we agree that there are benefits, but the risks far outweigh these benefits. In the 2017 ruling on the National Identification System, the core constitutional challenge raised against this is that the mandatory gathering of citizens' biometric data is unconstitutional. What did the government do in response? They said, okay, we're not going to take as much biometric data, we are going to exclude DNA, but we are going to keep some of the biometric data. I'm going to show this House that it further marginalizes the already marginalized and the central-based system unnecessarily and inevitably infringes on the privacy and civil liberties of our nation. So the marginalized, who are they? These are people who are illiterate, disabled, senior citizens, minority groups, example, Rastafarians. What is the government trying to achieve for these people? We are trying to accomplish on their behalf. NIDS is supposed to ensure everyone is included in social services, banking systems, and reduce identity theft, and so much more. what is the impact on those persons? If they volunteer, they become a target for their data being constantly monitored. They become a target for the government to constantly monitor them and people to have access to their information, which we'll get to shortly. If they are unwilling to subscribe to this system, while they officially volunteer in many cases, these systems can become mandatory in practice. So while the government is saying it's not mandatory, it becomes mandatory in practice in the sense that for essential day-to-day transactions, people are denied access because they don't have this ID. We see in Nordic countries where persons are not able, it's not mandatory for them to sign up, but they are not able to pay for rent, banking services, not even to verify their age on social media because it is widely used. They are not forced, but it's widely used, so they are left out of the system. In India, for example, which they cited, people lose social benefits such as food and starve to death because they cannot verify themselves. They are not a part of the system and they are still unreached, and it didn't change the reach of the unreached. So inalienable rights such as healthcare, education, and welfare will be challenged when persons, even if it is not made mandatory, when persons are allowed or persons are required to use the system. So what happens is that the very system that is designed to eradicate the marginalization further marginalizes those who are most vulnerable and those who are hesitant to volunteer to the system. Secondly, there is unnecessary and inevitable infringements of privacy and civil liberties. How will this happen? You see, despite the relative safety that is claimed by the proposition, citizens' privacy will suffer some amount of unwanted and unwarranted exposure. The Constitution allows for infringement of privacy only in these cases. National security is at risk, public safety is at risk, or when the rights of other citizens are at risk. Privacy is a fundamental part of who a person is and how they live their lives. The freedom to live privately is a safeguard of the Constitution, and we are saying that the government must ensure that they use all revenues to ensure that these rights are not infringed. So with the unnecessary infringement, we see a risk for hacking where the government becomes the primary target, the centralized system, and other agencies that are linked, which are not as safe as the centralized system, are now portals for this information to be accessed. In addition to that, legitimate access can also be excessive in some cases. A police officer needs information generally, and this is provided to them. But in my specific instance, they don't need as much information. Why should this be taken and given to anyone who rightly would use it for their job, but in this case, they don't need as much information, yet they are given all this information. It is necessary that we maintain these rights, and the Act as it is does not allow for the deletion, any provisions for deletion of information. So what we see is that the government can hold this information for even after I die and go on with it forever and ever, and we don't know when it ends. All of this is an infringement on the rights of a citizen, and just having data on me that I am hesitant to give is a breach of my privacy, hence a constitutional breach.
Thank you.
Which we must.
A little over the mark, but that's all right. Thank you very much for that contribution, second opposition speaker. We now move to the second segment of cross-examination. The difference here is that the proposition team, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the People's Ministry, gets a chance first to ask their questions of the opposition team, the teaching services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've constantly spoken about privacy by design, tiered access, and exemptions from unauthorized oversight, but the opposition still chooses to bring that topic up. Can I ask, what then would be gained from a decentralized system that would not put
what you have not engaged we are waiting on that.
All right. You indicated that the data would be kept without a necessary retention period, but do you not think that the strengthening of the laws included in a privacy by design architecture would take into consideration the rights and civil liberties of these individuals?
But Mr. Speaker, that's why we're contending that they are not debating the match to debate. They don't get to say that this is more important than privacy and civil liberties and then say that their law is going to strengthen privacy and civil liberties. They must be willing to accept that what they are going to achieve is more important than privacy and civil liberties. They are afraid to accept that and argue what the motion and the spirit of the motion demands that they argue. And so we even further contend that yes, strengthening of the existing framework is necessary. You can achieve that without centralizing the data and without going against the civil liberties of people. If people need to provide proof of address, that's why banks ask you for a bill.
So my opponents, you argued that we could still be able to identify our system, your second speaker, identify our citizens in a digital system that would create a centralized database nonetheless, don't you think?
It seems that you're unclear in what we said. We are saying that there are benefits in that it will help with identification, as there currently is no national standardized identification outside of a passport, which is too bulky. We are saying that those benefits are good. We concede that the benefits overall are good, but we say when there are infringements, it goes too far. With the centralization of data, including biometric data, we are saying that's where it goes too far. The benefit of a national ID, good. Anything outside of that is too far because it infringes on privacy and civil liberties.
And the burden is upon your bench to show why it is necessary to go too far to achieve this. We've contended that when the data is centralized, not only can people easily access.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the discipline that we're experiencing here in this match. We are now going to pause for 1 minute. Sorry. Oh, sorry. My apologies. So we're going to now invite the teaching services to ask their questions. And then when we're finished with this phase, we'll then pause for 1 minute.
Is it necessary for us to consider the right to privacy and other civil liberties to be less important than the government being able to identify my address?
Could you repeat the question?
Why is it that my right to privacy and civil liberties that define me as a human being is less important than the government's need to be able to verify my address?
You're talking on the basis that your right to privacy would be infringed upon. Again, we say to you, there would be tiered access where only the relevant agencies that have the relevant exemption or relevant clauses within the current acts would gain access to that information should the need arises. There is a regulatory oversight body that does auditing, does the reporting of this, and would not grant unauthorized accesses without the relevant clauses being in place.
Let's take the system at its best, because that's what we have been doing. Why is it that all of those benefits outweigh the rights of the citizens? Why should we give up our rights for these benefits?
You insist on saying that the rights are being given up on, However, within the Data Protection Act, within the NITS Act, there are clauses that keep the right to privacy intact. Persons have the ability to opt in, opt out. They have the right to correct. They have the right to erasure. All these things are within our current established act. So the privacy and their rights are not being infringed upon.
Mr. Speaker, our opponents have continued to speak about their rights being infringed upon, but they are yet to tell us that that would not outweigh the benefits in terms of the risk to their right, their privacy and their civil liberty. The only thing that we have heard so far.
Can the proposition team mention the Aadhaar model in India? How does the proposition team respond to the concern that India's court had pulled back the Aadhaar system for the very same concerns that we are debating today?
Given that India's India's data privacy laws were not as strong as the current DPA within Jamaica, yes, they had to repeal the Aadhaar in order to get it right. We are saying that the DPA is built strongly off the back of the UK's GDPR, and we can stand resolute in that the privacy and the civil liberties, the benefits to be gained from that centralized system will far outweigh the risks.
Thank both teams for the exchange just witnessed. We now pause for 1 minute to allow you to refresh yourselves ahead of the reply speeches. We'll resume with the reply speaker from the opposition team first, and then the debate will conclude with that from the proposition team. Debaters, your 1 minute pause begins now. Ended the pause, and lady rather, we've just exhausted the period of pause, and we now resume this debate. At this time we call upon the third speaker from the opposition team to conclude the opposition's case. Here.
Privacy, freedom, democracy are fundamental aspects of a democratic nation, especially in a modern world. Any risk to any one of these is a risk to a nation as a whole. Therefore, any cause that would see the risk to these should not be pursued. And that is why we are against a central identification system. We're not against an ID, not at all. But what we're against is a centralized system which would have risk, which our speakers, and I'm going to show you a few things, Mr. Speaker. So the debate ultimately reduces to a small number of decisive questions, and I'll address them directly. I'll show three things. First, why the government has failed on necessity. Second, why the scale and nature of harm identified by the opposition team decisively outweighs any benefit. And thirdly, I will do a comparative analysis of the benefits versus the risk. Opposition world is going to show, I'm going to show you that opposition world is better and superior for Jamaica. Now, our first speakers, both speakers together, would have established the principle that this policy is not a neutral upgrade, it's a transfer of power. A centralized system allows the states to link, access, and operationalize all personal identifications across domains. effectively hollowing out constitutional protections like privacy, freedom of expression, and protection from surveillance. They both have showed why that precedence is dangerous. Rights stop functioning as constraints when they are overridden for administrative case, which they have been pushing so far, which their argument is about efficiency. Secondly, the people who matter the most were spoken about by Rasheen. The elderly, rural citizens, the disabled, undocumented are most likely to be excluded from a single system when a single system fails or becomes mandatory in practice. And they said that their system is going to be mandatory in nature. So, Mr. Speaker, on the point of necessity, is a centralized system really necessary? Government case rests on the claim that centralization is needed for efficiency, coordination, and access. Opposition response has been clearly, those benefits are real, but not unique to centralization. This is not theoretical. Many states deliberately avoid centralization precisely because the risks are too high. Let's take the United States of America, for example. Identity is fragmented across systems, social security, state IDs, federal databases, because policymakers recognize that distributing data limits systemic risk. Now, in the United Kingdom, a proposed national ID was abandoned after sustained concern about privacy costs and state overreach. That decision reflects the broader principle of democratic governance. Just because something is centralized does not mean it should be. So the government says centralization is necessary when they really mean that it is easier. But in this debate where constitutional rights are implicated, ease is not a standard, necessity is. Question 2, Mr. Speaker. Are the risks acceptable given the scale and the nature? Government treats risk as something to be managed like a child. Opposition shows that these risks are endogenous. They arise from centralization themselves. Consider data concentration. A single unified repository becomes a trophy target. Take say the beautiful example they gave here when they spoke about the Aadhaar system, which was struck down by the Constitutional Court of India because that same system, which is supposed to give access to services by government, was struck down because there are some people within the same society that they want to put this in Jamaica has no access to it. And Russian talk about the disabled and the rural people. It is truth and fact that these individuals will not buy into a centralized system because they are concerned when it comes down to trust in the governing system, which is necessary for a healthy democracy to take place. Some of the risks that we have outlined and have addressed is that even a single catastrophic breach, leaks, authentication, failures, and data exposure incidents produce real-world harms, and that is not what we want for Jamaica. What we want is the fragmented system. We can strengthen these things, as Kevin and Rashina have said, strengthen these systems so persons can have greater access to sources. Now let's look at the worlds. Mr. Speaker, in government world, Jamaica gains administrative speed, but it does so by centralizing power and risk. One breach can affect everybody. One policy change can expand surveillance across sectors. One failure can lock people out of services. The system becomes permanent fixture that future governments can repurpose. In opposition world, Jamaica still reforms. Systems are digitized, data is clean, agencies are coordinated without aggregating all data in one place. Failures are contained, access is multi-channeled, and rights remain meaningful constraints. The most vulnerable retain routes into services even when one pathway fails. Measured improvement preserves safeguards. Now this is what the opposition have said. We don't have a problem with ID system. What we have a problem is a centralized idea that they are pushing forward to this House. Thank you.
Thank you very much, third opposition speaker, for concluding the case from the vantage point of the opposition team teaching services. All right, so we now conclude the debate overall with the presentation from the third speaker, the reply speaker from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the People's Ministry. Let us bring the people's debate to a conclusion. Hear, hear.
My opponents, if Aadhaar is so faulty, why is there a 99.9 success rate? You need to get your facts straight. All right. Honorable adjudicators, worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, as third speaker for the affirmative, my responsibility is clear: to demolish the opposition's weak, fear-based arguments, reaffirm why the centralized identification is essential, and prove authoritatively and decisively that the benefits far outweighs the risk. By now, my opponents would really love to change their mind on their stance, I know. However, pride still has them hanging on to their false narrative, beating a dead horse, I see. Popular Column team members, we have made our point clear. A centralized ID system is not simple about identification. It is about governance. It is about inclusion. It is about efficiency. And most importantly, it is about access. Opposition, step to the front of the line, yeah. Let us hasten to address you. Being loud does not make you correct. You attempted to alarm us with matters concerning making criminals out citizens, in fragment and privacy, public and the risk. Come on. The debate is not only between privacy and progress. It is between responsible modernization and inefficient stagnation. My opponents would want us to believe that a centralized ID threatens democracy. However, our Jamaican reality teaches something far different, that the system, when systems are weak, this is what the reality is. This is what the reality is. When a system is weak, fraudulent activity increases. Vulnerable citizens suffer immensely. Benefits are delayed. Yes, a centralized ID system that is properly, and listen, properly governed, unlock opportunities, not create barriers. We're talking about access, we're talking about accuracy, talking about equity, talking about speed, speaking about fraudulent prevention. However, adjudicators, let us be realistic. Let us be realistic. No freedom exists for the mother in White House, Westmoreland, with her displaced children, when we talk about getting onto the different programs, the path, the roof, heart, because of fragmented bureaucracies in our way. My opponents, please put on your thinking cap and look me in the face this morning and tell me that civil liberty exists for vulnerable Jamaicans who remain excluded from opportunities because disconnected system delays support. My opponent, please stop forcing your fears of a centralized ID system on us. Let us come together and confront what we call a fragmented system failure. Now, you have heard my colleagues passionately, we passionately affirm the moot of this debate. We have established without a reasonable doubt why a centralized system is needed within the Jamaican context. Having a centralized ID system will not only eliminate carrying around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, all them something heavy if you carry, sometimes we misplace them. We are talking about one card that has everything under one place. Come on. I know you would want to change your narrative right now. Yeah, so having a centralized ID system will not only eliminate carrying around all these cards, but also issue that one ID card that is interconnected to all government entities. We also stated that this centralized ID system will assist the vulnerable in society in accessing benefits. Yes, this is why we need that centralized ID system. The government verifies those who are desperate, to help the government to verify those who are desperately in need quickly. All right, so let me also hasten to tell you, you also have not proved you have also not helped us to prove that the benefits do outweigh the risk. In fact, you have given support to our proposition. We are not arguing that there are no risks, but what we are saying this morning to you, my worthy opponents, that the benefits far outweighs. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so very, very much. Thanks to all the debaters in this match for a tantalizing exchange of ideas. We have the task now of going and weighing those ideas in order to come to a decision. But before we do so, I turn over now to Paula Shea, Madam Moderator, as she brings this segment of the proceedings to a close.
Thank you, Jermaine, and thank you to our viewers and to the teams who made some very convincing arguments that the judges will now have to deliberate on and let us know who emerged on top of this match. The next person that you will hear from is the chief adjudicator, who will sum up the match and announce the winner. And for those of you online, let us know in the comments, are you for or against the moot? Thank you again for joining us, and stay tuned to hear the results.
Big dreams start small. At GoDaddy, we help you take that first step and every step after. From getting your domain to creating your website, email, and online security, we've got you covered. You don't need to be a tech expert. You just need a starting point. GoDaddy gives you the tools, the expert support, and the push to make it real. Your brand starts here with GoDaddy.
Guys, can you believe these videos are generated by an AI called Vidu? It can create unbelievably realistic videos from just text and images. This AI has been trained on real video footage, so it can make almost anything you can imagine with incredible accuracy and consistency. You can create 5-second video clips with smooth camera movements. And the best part, it's incredibly fast. Generate them in just 10 seconds. And the best part is, you can try Vidu right now.
You know that big presentation you have to finish? Well, it's not going to write itself. Especially since you're busy with all the pings, boops, and bops. You need writing help that cuts through the noise. That's where Grammarly comes in. With an AI chat that helps you meet every moment. See? No sweat. Need your writing to sound more knowledgeable or precise? Or with generated text more every day? With Grammarly's Humanizer, it's easy to nail just the right tone. No more second guessing, no more wondering, does this sound okay? Sometimes you need to anticipate an audience's response, perhaps from someone important.
Ooh, that's great. Real me loves a solid timeline.
With Grammarly's reader reactions, you can do just that.
And these updates are exactly how we'll deliver.
Solid timeline. Good job.
These tools are just the beginning, because good writing fuels great ideas.
If your workflow looks like 12 open tabs and 3 subscriptions, stop. This is
Steam rising from the cup in my hands, early light spilling through the blinds, and you're still here half asleep, like the peace I tried to find. No makeup, no noise, no rush, just your breath moving slow. And I swear the way you're next to me makes the whole world softer, you know. Ain't no headlines, ain't no pressure, just a calm we can measure. It's coffee and quiet love, slow mornings and gentle touch. No need to say too much, 'cause it's feelings enough. Coffee and quiet love, you and me before the world wakes up. If I could stay right here forever, I swear I would, I swear I would. Phone buzzing, but I let it ring. Let the day wait outside the door. 'Cause the moment you open your eyes, I don't need anything more. You smile like you got nowhere to be, like time isn't chasing you. And I stop believing love can be easy when it's built this true. No drama, no doubt in the air, just you in the morning. Here's coffee and quiet. Slow mornings and gentle touch. No need to say too much, 'cause it's feelings enough. Coffee and quiet love. Coffee and quiet love. You and me before the world wakes up. If I could stay right here forever, I swear I would, I swear I would. If the world gets heavy later, if my mind starts running wild, I'll come back to this moment, to the peace inside your smile. Some love is loud like thunder, but ours is like sunrise. Slow, steady, getting brighter, right before my eyes. Just stay. Coffee and quiet love. Just stay. Coffee and quiet love. Double. Coffee and quiet love. Coffee and quiet love. Coffee and quiet love. Morning. 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 Sunlight dancing on your shoulders, golden like he knows your name. You're still wrapped up in my t-shirt, and nothing else feels the same. Outside the world is moving fast, but in here time feels kind, like love was made for mornings when your heart is clear and fine. You don't have to say a word, I can feel you close. The sunlight on your skin, and peace in the way you breathe. Every time the morning comes, I fall again so easily. The sunlight smile at me like you're not afraid to stay. Makes me feel like love is simple when it's honest anyway. Let the day wait on the other side. Right now you're all I need. Sunlight on your skin and peace in the way you breathe. Every time the morning comes, I fall again so easily. Sunlight on your skin, like heaven's resting on you. If love had a color, baby, it would look like you. Ooh. If I ever lose my focus, if I ever lose my way, I'll remember how you look right now, like calm in human shape. And I'll come back to this feeling, this quiet little truth. Some mornings make you grateful just to wake up next to you. Sunlight on your skin. Sunlight on your skin. Sunlight on your skin. Sunlight on your skin. You don't rush me when I'm waking. You don't pull me from my dreams. You just lay right there beside me, like you've always been my peace. Curtains open, sky still pale, birds singing low outside. And you kiss me like you've got time, like love doesn't have to hide. Soft morning, slow kisses, no rush, no missing pieces. Just your lips and my heartbeat, keeping perfect, easy rhythm. Soft morning, slow kisses, a love that feels like forgiveness. If the day gets harder later, I'll remember. You make breakfast with your hair tied, barefoot walking in the kitchen. I just watch you like a song. I never wanna stop listening, and I swear the little moments hit deeper than the grand, 'cause peace is in the simple things, like holding your warm hand. If love is a safe place, then mornings are the proof. Soft kisses, slow kisses, no rush, no missing pieces. Just your lips and my heartbeat, keeping perfect.
conclusion of this match that featured two teams. On proposition, we had the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and on the opposition team, we had the Teaching Service. The mote that was contested by both these teams centered around whether or not the risks, the detriments, if you will, that emanate from a centralized data system, whether it is justified by the supposed benefits overall. And we think that both teams did a fairly good job at engaging in contestation around some central ideas in the debate. On side proposition, we hear the idea that a decentralized system creates fragmentation and problems with respect to citizens having to have multiple pieces of identification to go through various processes, and that is not ideal. They also speak to the fact that government can actually engage in better data management if the data is centralized, sort of almost preemptively responding to a risk from opposition that says the data once centralized becomes a target for data breach and manipulation. Okay. From the opposition team, we get some fundamental ideas, ideas grounded in principles surrounding the fundamental rights of a citizen, of a human being actually. And they say that the right to privacy, the right to be forgotten, as it is termed in the European legislation, the General Data Protection Act of Europe, has to be respected. They say that governments ought to do for their citizens what governments ought to do, which is to provide services and other amenities for the citizens' well-being. But they say that can be done through alternative means. Insofar as in the status quo, there are problems, again, with the mechanisms that exist right now. Team opposition tells us that those mechanisms can be resolved through more robust systems that assure better service delivery from the government, without necessarily infringing as significantly and as gravely as would obtain in the government world on citizens' privacy rights and so forth, right? Opposition raises some key ideas surrounding individual citizens who may choose not to have their rights infringed for varying reasons. An individual might choose not to trust the government enough, and therefore not wanting the government to have archived within its database centrally, private information about that individual, which could again be at risk from data manipulation and data use, not just from the government, but other nefarious actors. They again also tell us that other stakeholders are also of concern. So for example, they say to us that the elderly, the vulnerable, the poor, disenfranchised, who may not be able to access that identification, they're put at a risk insofar as they are excluded from services that the government would want to provide, insofar as the government, under mechanisms like NIDS, would wish to have citizens all comply to NIDS, and therefore would make a disincentive the acceptance of NIDS, if you will, right? We felt that on the question of the mandatory nature of a centralized data system, we know that has been a conversation surrounding NIDS for some time. We're very much well read, and we know that that was an issue brought before the Constitutional Court. The government lost, and NIDS, as it is right now, does not require a mandatory mechanism or compliance. That said, it doesn't necessarily defeat entirely opposition's argumentation about the mandatory nature, insofar as there is the intention of the government originally to have mandated it, and we anticipate that is going to create some kind of a stronger coercive mechanism towards citizens actually obtaining the identification housed in a centralized space. To that extent, we are unclear as to what then becomes the overarching sort of benefit that is mutually exclusive to other mechanisms which would guarantee those benefits without necessarily bringing about the harms that obtain with respect to the centralized data system. All right? So, ladies and gentlemen, this was a debate worth listening to, and we're happy that you enjoyed it with us. The scores reflect 286 points for the winning team, and that contrasts with the second place team's 262. The winners of this match in the public sector debate competition for 2026 come to us from the opposition side. That is, ladies and gentlemen, the teaching services. So congratulations to teaching service, and may we have a round of applause for the second place team, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. We wish to commend highly two debaters, but one is by the scores of the judges better than the other. But two are worthy of commendation. We think that the second and third speakers on Team Teaching Service did a remarkable job at proving principally and pragmatically why the harm with respect to a centralized system is unjustified. We also appreciate, generally speaking, the consistency of the team's case from the opposition side with respect to things like the threat, things like the principled argumentation against the centralized data or identification model that was proposed by the proposition team. Okay? The best debater in this match, though, comes to us as well from the opposition team, and that is the second opposition speaker. And just, of course, right behind him was the opposition reply. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for sharing this space with us. We look forward to your company for subsequent matches. Until then, take care.